Does Dakorien Moore make an instant impact for the Ducks and become a starter?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into The Portal. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making The Portal your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to get all the excitement with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head over to FanDuel.com to get started. Today's show, we bring on the golfer himself, Mr. Spencer McLaughlin, who thinks he's going to the tour, apparently. But while I don't agree with that, I've heard good things about your game, Spence.
Well, I don't have any delusions about making the PGA Tour, but I can confidently say I am better than most of the people watching or listening to this show.
No, that's honestly pretty good. Golf is not an easy sport. It's one I never took up. It's just too darn expensive. But Dakorien Moore, talking about expensive, I'm sure NIL was pretty hefty for him to come play for the Ducks. We're going to talk about Dakorien quite a bit. The Ducks lost some good players at receiver. Where do you think Moore fits into the rotation early on as compared to later in the season for Oregon?
Well, that's a question going into spring football. What's not a question is whether he ends up having an impact as a true freshman. I cannot see a world where, unless he gets injured, where he's not on the field right away. Everything about him from the recruiting and scouting community is this guy is different. I saw one analyst, I believe it on 3, said that if he was in this 2024 recruiting class from last cycle, he would have been the number 2 receiver behind Jeremiah Smith for obvious reasons. That guy's ready to play in the NFL right now. But he would have been ahead of Ryan Williams at Alabama and Cam Coleman at Auburn. And that is some high praise. And he's a different player, I think, than those guys. He's a little bit smaller, but I look at where Oregon's receiver room is at, Brian, and say, boy, there is an opportunity for him to be a day one impact starter with Dante Moore at quarterback, because you're losing Tez Johnson from the slot, and he was a big part of what Oregon did the last couple of years. He was second on the team in receiving yards and touchdowns in 2023. He led the team in receiving this past year, would have hit 1,000 yards for the second straight season had he not gotten injured. So I think that void, sure, Justice Lowe's got more experience, to be sure, and showed some good things last year. But Lowe's someone I think who can play on the inside or outside because he's a little bit taller, but he's got good speed and is a really good route runner. But Dakorien, just to me, fills that void immediately of he can step in and start, but he's got to prove it. He's not going to walk into a room that is void of talent, because Justice Lowe, like I said, wasn't a super highly touted recruit. He's going into his 4th year of college football, Brian. He's one of the earliest recruits. Dan Lanning and Junior Adams got committed at the wide receiver room in dating back to their first season in Eugene. Gary Bryant Jr. is another guy who can play in the slot. He's going into his 6th year of college football and his 3rd with the Ducks. He didn't really play last year because of injury. So there are options in that room, but I with the hype that this kid has, he seems to have the ability to be better than both of them right away.
Well, that's a really, really big part of this puzzle because, like you said, Tez was probably one of the guys. If he'd have played in the East and had more eyeballs on him, I think he would have got more acclaim. He was really good, and he was as good a slot as just about anybody in college football. You can't just replace him, but I can tell you just from seeing Dakorien live, not many guys run routes like him. He's a hooks product, which is one of the main trainers in the Dallas area. He knew what he was doing. His start and stop ability, whether in a route or somebody attempting to tackle him, he is absolutely electric with the football. Now, to your point, though, he's not the biggest guy, but you're not going to compete more than he does, and his electric athleticism, I don't see how he doesn't get on the field. I wouldn't be shocked if they used him at some point as a return man, reverses, jet sweeps, a little bit of everything. So I agree with you. He plays early. I wouldn't be surprised if he started game 1.
Me neither. mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but it wouldn't be a total shock if he gets worked in as the year goes on. You know, the highest rated recruit in the history of Oregon football. Do you know who it is off the top of your head?
Mm-mm.
This guy named Kayvon Thibodeau. He was pretty good. Now, he was coming into a position that requires typically more adjustment from a physical standpoint than wide receiver does. But he was also as ready as you possibly could have been, and he was a freak of nature, but he didn't start right away. First half of that 2019 season, he was the number 1 overall player. He comes up to Oregon. It was a huge, huge recruitment, all this hype. He worked his way into the fold, but by the Pac-12 championship game, RIP, and the Rose Bowl, he was taking over games on his own. There was a drive that he against Utah in that Pac-12 championship game that he just took over on his own. He dominated it. He had, I think, 2 sacks or a couple pressures, forced a quick pass. Like it was, what he became. And then he was really good in the Rose Bowl too. But he wasn't that guy in the first couple weeks, even against lesser competition like Portland State or Nevada or whoever they were playing that year. They weren't having him in a starting role. And that guy physically as ready as you can be. But the positional difference is what I kind of wonder about there. So I could see Dakorien Moore being more of an impact guy by game 10 than game 2, because Jeremiah Smith certainly was. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah, like he settled in more as the year went on. But he was also behind Carnell Tate and Emeka Ibuka. I don't think that same caliber of talent is in Oregon's wide receiver room right away. So I think it'll come down to the position group evaluation by Dan Lanning and Junior Adams.
The other position on the opposite side of the ball that I think Oregon needs an upgrade, based on the 2 of those players you just mentioned being added to Jeremiah, Oregon's secondary wasn't big enough last year, in my opinion, against the weak teams. They weren't tall enough. That's probably a better way to say it. They had Brew. They had Offord. I mean, they got 3 really good corners. Offord, I know, and he's technically, kind of ironically, very much like Dakorien Moore. You're not going to find a guy out of high school that's got more. He's a plug-and-play guy. If he does not start at one of the 3 corner spots, I don't know how Oregon will do their nickel.
They really – I mean, the nickel spot is truly a hybrid. Like,
I know.
It's just kind of – it's the nickel spot. It's not a safety. It's not a corner. It's probably closer to a corner than a safety, but there are definitely safety elements about it. Like, it's just what it is. And – I don't know, based on what you said, yeah, he could start at that spot, but they also brought in Theron Johnson from Northwestern. Kind of seems like that's a starting nickel, so I don't know what Offord's playing time is. I think that's less clear than Dakorien.
Trey McNutt is the other kid, getting a kid out of Cleveland if you're Oregon. I remember you and I talking about that on the Locked On Ducks, but it's just really weird. Because, I mean, I know Oregon recruits nationally, and they're the hardest team to predict, but they really, even for them, broadened their horizons. It was everywhere this year. If you put a dot on the map, Oregon probably got a player within a 200-mile radius of that dot. It was just wild. What other players in the 25 class do you think have a chance to make an impact for the Ducks year 1?
Well, there's been some, I'll say, light discussion about a guy like Zaire Addison trying to make a push to start at offensive tackle, and I know you're bullish on him, Brian.
I know I'm biased, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a challenging proposition for 2 reasons.
It's an offensive lineman in the Big Ten, man. That's hard.
Yeah, that was the first point. Is positionally, the number Josh Connerly is about to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. He was a 5-star recruit. I believe he was the number 1 offensive tackle in his class, or he's certainly one of the top 2 or 3. He didn't start. He played as a true freshman. He had a role. He was the jumbo tackle when Oregon would go 13 or 14 personnel, but 13 personnel. I don't think they had a 14 package. They'd go 13 personnel with an extra offensive lineman, no receivers on the field. Lanning's done it since he got to Oregon. That is a legitimate, part of the Ducks offense, but Connerly stepping in and having that role as the extra lineman was really telling for what he was going to be. But he still didn't start. And then as a sophomore, he started, and as a junior, he started and got a whole heck of a lot better. So I think Offord and Moore are the 2 most likely true freshmen to start. Maybe you get a Brandon Finney in there as well, who also from kind of a random place back east in Maryland or Pennsylvania, somewhere up in the northeast part of the country. Penn State was after him. One of Oregon's starting corner spots, maybe two of them are wide open. Like one of them could be filled by Jalil Florence coming back. Is he 100%? Is he the same guy he was? He was injured most of this past year. So I don't know. But the only for sure starting defensive back next year, I think, is Dylan Thieneman, the transfer from Purdue.
Yeah,
I think,
that's a lock.
of the 5 defensive back spots who were starters for Oregon, and they played, 6 or 7 pretty regularly this past year. They're losing their top 6 defensive backs who all had a significant impact. There is one spot that I can say with 100% certainty this guy's going to be the starter, and that's Thieneman. Other than that, you can tell me Trey McNutt starts, I believe you. Offord, I believe you. Finney, I believe you. Dorian Brew, I believe you. I just keep going down the list. There are a lot of options in there. I think spring football in the secondary for Oregon is going to be really, really interesting to follow.
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the portal. What do the Ducks need to do to get better? That is next here on the portal. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. Live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Live betting features allow you to stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head over to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Do the Ducks need, Spencer, to add anything else from the portal? There's a 10-day window for those that don't know after spring ball.
Well, I wouldn't say need. Could add to one of 2 spots. But I wanted to go back to your question before, just a moment, about true freshmen. One guy I'll throw at you, Vander Plug, tight end. That's a position that I think you see true freshmen play a lot. Oregon has seen true freshmen play a lot. I mean, in 21, and you had Terrence Ferguson playing a bunch. You had Maliki Monteval played as a true freshman. Kenyon Sadiq played as a true freshman. Roger Saliapaga saw the field a bit this past season. Saliapaga got injured, or else he's probably Oregon's number 2 tight end going into next year. He still could be, but he has to come back and be fully healthy in that. Or he'd probably be the number 3 because they brought in Jamari Johnson from Louisville. But I could see Plug having a role. Just from a positional standpoint, I think there's more of an opportunity there. For the transfer portal, linebacker is the spot that I look at and wonder if they want to bring in a veteran. Because right now, your top 2 guys are Bryce Betcher and Devin Jackson, who are both on the team this past season, had big roles. Betcher was Oregon's best linebacker. PFF said that. I think everybody's eye test said that. He was Oregon's leading tackler. He's going to come back and start, and Devin Jackson will be there as well going into his 4th year. And I think those guys are really solid. I'd like to see him take a step forward, particularly in pass coverage. But overall, I feel solid about that room. After that, there's talent, but there's no experience anywhere. And Oregon has used 4 linebackers regularly the last couple of years. So you're going to be calling on either a redshirt sophomore in Jerry Mixon, who'd probably be at the top of the depth chart there, and then a bunch of redshirt freshmen from the 23 class, 24, sorry, with Braden Platt and Kamar Mathudi and Dylan Williams. Those were all 4-star.
Really good players.
Yeah, the really promising players. Are they ready to go and be major contributors in their 2nd year? That's a question. Now, if the answer is at least one of them is, Oregon probably is done in the portal. But if it's we go through spring ball and see these guys are still good, we still like them, but it's a 26 deal where we'd like to have them play a significant role, then linebacker would be the spot. But that's pretty much the only one, Brian, because you're set at quarterback. You bring in Mekhi Hughes at running back. You've brought in Malik Benson at wide receiver. Evan Stewart's returning. Got a bunch of young talent there. Secondary, I guess at safety, if they don't like any of the guys, if they don't want to start a true freshman and they don't feel good about the safeties from their past cycles, guys like Aaron Flowers or Peyton Woodyard, then okay, safety could be a position. But it feels like Oregon has recruited so many secondary guys with a bunch of talent. I can see a world where they feel like a transfer is better, is more capable of producing next year. I just got to imagine that at least a couple of those guys are ready to step up and be legitimate contributors this fall.
Well, I'll get you out of here on this. Based on what you just said, my only question is, do you think they have enough experience? You got Thieneman in the secondary.
Yeah.
That's a talented player. I know Purdue sucked, but they did use him very well last year. Is there enough experience back there that they're going to feel good, A, with the chemistry, and B, with the leadership when they're playing an upper echelon team? Do you think that's something that might make them think, you know what, maybe, even if it's not like a dude, somebody that was a good player at Cal, or I don't know where, it was at least do you think they'll bring in another rotational guy, maybe, if nothing else? Because I don't know how many scholarships they have to play with either. And that's your boat.
Well, but the rosters are also expanding, so they probably
would
have plenty of options. Plus, they could encourage guys to transfer and say, hey, we're not going to play you here.
That's a thing. It is what it is.
Yeah. That's the thing. Everybody does that. Like, you're not going to play this season. If you're okay with that, fine. But if you're not okay with that, then we'd encourage you to, the EA College Football 25 feature, encourage transfer. Which is a real thing in the game for those who don't know. But I can see that. I don't know about in the secondary. This past year, they played two safeties almost exclusively. They did not rotate. A lot
of reps.
They did not rotate those guys. Tysheem Johnson, Kobe Savage both logged over, I think they were both over 800 snaps. They both had at least 750 this past year, at least 700. But, they were very heavy. Now, at the corner position, it was a little different. They had Jabbar Muhammad, they had Nico Reed, they had Brandon Johnson at nickel, but Dante Manning was a corner that came off the bench and was regularly on the field, or first guy off the bench. And they didn't really use a lot of other options that they had. Guys like Cam Alexander or Sione Laulea, who could also be Laulea, that could be a player in this year's secondary. But I don't know that that's just how they look at that position room. They brought in a semi-depth piece of sorts, Connor Soley at linebacker a couple cycles ago. He was a special teams guy at Arizona State. He really just became a special teams guy at Oregon. I could have seen him I could have talked myself into, he'll play 10 to 15 snaps a game when it's still on the line. He didn't. So I don't know that they bring in a lot of transfers that they view defensively as depth or rotation pieces. Offensively, we have seen that. Couple offensive linemen they have brought in haven't had big roles until this guy goes down, or you have to shuffle this around with the offensive line or whatnot. Or wide receiver is another one where a couple guys have come in. Like a couple cycles ago, they brought in Caleb Chapman from Texas A&M. Never ended up having a role. Barely even saw the field, and he was just someone I think they brought in as an insurance policy depth piece or what have you. So I don't think they go to the portal, but if they did, linebacker would be the top spot. That would be the most logical one anyway, unless just an absolute dude becomes available at another position. I don't know who that would be, but they added this guy named Derek Harmon in the spring portal last window. That worked out pretty well.
There you go. He is Spencer McLaughlin for Locked on Ducks. Spence, how can you tell everybody what's going on in your world, man?
Locked on Ducks, Locked on College Football, as well, covering the biggest stories in this, what we consider the greatest sport on planet Earth. Monday through Friday, all year round on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And I'm on Twitter at SMcLaughlinCFB. You can hit me up anytime, say something mean, say something nice. I really don't care. I'm just lonely, so I'm looking for the engagement,
There he is. He's the golfer, Spencer McLaughlin. You can follow the portal on all the same platforms, and you can find us on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple, and everywhere else. Like, subscribe, and share the podcast. Thank you very much. We'll see you again soon.